about, you can go to the link below, and there is a place for you to just submit your email, and you will have not only the reference images to this one, but all the reference images to all 27 of our live streams that we've done in the past. So paint along with this. Please ask questions. And without further ado, I'm going to let everyone get started. Let us know where you're from. We know some of y'all are from all around the world. We'd love to hear from you. So make sure you interact with this, because that's why we love to do this. All right, let's get started. By the way, I'll help the timer.
Wow, you look amazing right now.
Right?
And I'm gonna fuck this up.
It's a good spirit to go to enter this.
And I just realized I said a bad word within the first minute of camera.
You know, we're setting the tone.
Welcome.
Yeah, setting it up well.
So I can tell everybody's chatting today. So Alex, you just got done traveling somewhere, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Nobody can hear my question because I'm not mic'd, but...
So Alex,
Hey!
Alex just traveled recently. Alex, where did you go to?
Well, at first, I was teaching in Yorkshire, England, at workshops in Yorkshire / Rosemary and Company, and that was amazing. Yeah, that was just so beautiful. And then, so that was like a whole week, and then immediately after that we went to Italy, Rome, Florence, and Venice
Man.
for 2 weeks.
that sounds amazing. How come you came back?
Well, after deciding where to eat for 2 weeks straight, I was like, I need to get some work done. No, it's like you see all the we kind of overbooked it, and then you see all the museums and all the churches, and then you're like, wow, all that's left to do is decide where to eat and where to get dessert, and yeah, no, but it was amazing. But could have chose a less touristy season and a colder season. That would have been better.
When's your next trip?
Oh, I have no idea. Well, at the end of the year, we'll be going to Australia to see Divya's parents, family.
Nice.
So yeah, I guess we are. I was just thinking about the fact that I had to do multiple demos in front of students.
You say that with such a tone. Would you like a second stab at that?
And I'm just thinking how it's like, I can't believe I did it in front of people who paid to watch it. Because
okay.
now I'm...
So the pressure's
like
off
I'm
now. This is free.
Yeah, but I feel like I don't know what I'm doing.
You know, sometimes that's actually helpful for people to hear, is that, you know, it's not like you go into a painting knowing everything
Oh,
all the
man.
time. At least I rarely feel like I feel like that.
No, yeah, you wish for the day where you have like this
I could love to feel
confident
like that.
method you're confident in, just that day never comes.
Okay, so we've got some folks joining us online. Alex Tabbitt says hello from Los Angeles. Joyce Kramalnik says hello from Mugilto, Washington. Sue Braswell says hello from Virginia. Daniela Protopapa says hello from Milan, Italy. And Derek Cohey says sup East Oaks.
From Kokomo, Indiana.
Kokomo, Indiana.
I know Kokomo, Indiana. That was very close to my high school. I went to Culver Military Academy, so I had a couple of friends from Kokomo. So Danielle, it's good to see you. Yeah, it's always she's a regular with us.
Kokomo.
So I'm gonna open the doors. Cool. So, Chelsea, I saw recently that you worked on a master copy, a Sargent master copy, and you were saying that it just didn't even turn out to be able to do on film. So I wanted to let people know that about it. That it looked like you learned a lot from it. Tell me about that process.
Yeah, it was a blast. So this is my, I think, second full master study that I've done. First one doing, I don't speak French, so I'm just gonna say Repose rather than butchering that title. And honestly learned the hard way that was a rather ambitious composition. But so for the second one, I did a piece that was smaller in scope, which wound up making a really significant difference in my ability to focus on what was important and come away feeling successful with it. So this was a portrait. It was Sir General John Cowan's, and it was actually a piece that Michael Shane Neal talked about in his keynote at Portrait Society. And he took apart what he thought was so significant about that piece and worth learning about, and honestly just like listening to Shane talk and like all of his passion for it and insights about it. Like I came out of that session at Portrait Society thinking, okay, I need to go home and do a study of this as soon as I am able. But it was just like a master class in understanding edges and looking at Sargent's piece and teasing apart like what would have had to come first here, and being really intentional about the order and just exactly how to set yourself up for success from like every mark you're putting down. And it was a beast, but just really, really rewarding. So I know a lot of people are all about the master studies who tune in to Painting from Life. I have a full video breaking down what the time lapse of that actually was on my YouTube channel if anyone wants to follow along. And if you're thinking of doing a master study, either of this piece or anything else, I would say, like, go for it. It was awesome.
What could you describe the painting? Because I probably know it.
Yeah, so it's a like middle-aged man with sort of sandy brown hair and a military uniform.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yep.
I do know.
Got like a red kind of sash happening.
Oh yeah, I wanna watch that.
I feel so flattered. Alex is gonna watch my YouTube video.
Damn right. No, yeah, I like to look at Sargent because of that reason. You can almost sort of see his thought process. Imagine what was placed first.
I sparked a lot of controversy with this video because I made the title something about like learning from the greatest of all time, which like is always subjective, but the number of people who wanted to come in the comments and be like, well, what about so-and-so? I was like, y'all, you're missing the point.
That's kind of funny.
But there was a specific mark on that painting. The background is all pretty translucent, you know, like on my palette right here, I've got transparent oxide brown and ultramarine. That wouldn't have been exactly what Sargent was using, but that's like generally the vibe of the background. And then like right up defining the edge of the left ear as we look at the portrait, there's just this opaque black. And I had talked about how I assumed it was Sargent making a drawing correction because the rest of the background was all transparent. And yeah, a lot of people had a lot of opinions about that too. And that is the beauty of making content for the internet.
Yeah, the beauty of YouTube.
Yeah.
Haters.
Honestly, I kind of just let them go because I was like, you know what, the more people argue in the comments, like the more the YouTube algorithm is going to be like, wow, a lot of people are talking about this.
Community engagement. Yeah.
I was like, yes, argue away. Tell me how bad Sargent is. Tell me.
So we've got a couple more folks joining us. We have Edsel from the Philippines. We have Ian Balfour from Wellington, New Zealand. Tina Figarelli from Chicago. And Derek Cohey is waxing poetic about living near where Louis used to live. And Becky Webb says, I love the one that has the eyes in already. Very dramatic. It's going to be gorgeous.
I like how Alex is like, wait. I mean, you have eyes in already.
No, they're not talking about me.
So I'm seeing from my bird's eye perspective back here, it's really fun to see the differences between the development of these three portraits and how everybody has their own different style of blocking in. And I think that's a really cool thing to see, to illustrate to everybody that, you know, there's multiple ways of creating the exact same thing, and you'll never make it the same painting twice.
Process would be the most fun. So like we can totally get in the weeds about, you know, the idea that maybe there's like a right way to do it or something like that, but
Ask YouTube. Ask YouTube, they'll tell you.
yeah, they'll tell you the right way to
The
do
right
it.
way.
If I've learned anything from my tenure on YouTube.
Yeah, I feel like I'm like prepping my whole painting career to do it the fun way in like 20 years or something. It's like, okay, let's take it slow. let's get better at drawing. Let's do all this stuff so that maybe one day you could enjoy it.
What is that song? Maybe this time I'll be lucky. Does anyone know what I'm talking about?
That sounds vaguely familiar.
Oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to like, someone in the comments tell me about that show tune, because I feel like that's what Alex is saying.
I like thinking of it as playing the long game. Somebody told me that before, but that we're playing a long game here. And the goal of the game is to keep playing the game. So sometimes I find that helpful to remember during the journey.
I feel like that's especially
Totally.
true for the indirect painters, is like, you know, I'll totally get lost watching an Alla Prima painter in the first like 15 minutes of a piece, and then like definitely after the first hour, I'm like, okay, now I want to see like all what the indirect painters are doing, because like that's when like your magic really starts to happen, I think.
Yeah.
So that way I can build a nice foundation to build on top of. And even though we have not going to be able to get as specific and everything that I would want to in such a short period of time, but at least I can get, you know, if I get a decent block in, then the rest can follow along.
So Rosalie Vaccaro asked, what's the model's name? This is Kaylee, and she's doing a fantastic job so far.
Okay. I know I have a problem, and I don't want to admit it. Like artist therapy. First step.
Yeah. First step is admitting you have the problem.
I'm wondering, Chelsea, yesterday here in the studio we were talking about like stubbornness and how stubbornness can be a good tool for an artist to use while they're working. Is that something that you find that helps or inhibits you?
Oh, how come you're directing that question at me?
Well, because you said, oh, I have a problem and I don't want to admit it.
Okay, fair enough. I'll answer that question after the break.
All right. Break time.
Saved by the bell.
By the way, I'm I'm in charge of running the mics today. So yeah, super excited to be here and watch everybody work. It's incredible.
Evie's our new artist in resident. We're so excited to have her here.
Yee. So we've got some more folks who've jumped on. Joe Ellen says, hello, going to paint this with you guys. Becky asked, who is the artist to the left of the model? So that would be Chelsea. And then in the center, we have Alex. And then on the other side of him, we have Erica. And Andrea says, hello, could you talk about varnishing, specifically products you like or avoid, and recommend for painters who have never varnished before, plus any important tips that you've learned from this experience? Thanks.
This video. That's my main tip. It's the perfect video. I have all my students and anyone else who asks me about it, go look at that. I think it's on Facebook.
Where can they watch?
It is on the East Oaks Facebook page, but he recommends Conservar and like kind of Gamvar to a limited extent. And yeah, I talk to a lot of painters who haven't varnished before and are kind of feeling nervous about it, but like so long as your painting is touch dry for Gamvar, like none of the paint is wet anymore, smeary, and so long as you've given a painting, I'd say 6 months to a year for Conservar, like there's nothing to be afraid of.
And yep, that's exactly my thoughts on it too.
Oh, and the reason you want to wait for it to be dry as long as you can, not only do you not want to disturb the surface and reactivate those layers, but you want the painting to be dry, so that way over time you don't have your top layer be rigid and your bottom layer still be fluid, and therefore it'll crack. So that's why you do want to wait for it to be dry as much as you can. Do you mind straightening up just a little bit? Is that okay for you guys?
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Kelly. Erica.
Yes.
Sorry. Could you turn
Oh.
yours on? Perfect.
Turn toward me a little bit, but like a little bit. Actually, I'm gonna let Erica fix you.
I think that's pretty
right.
good.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, it looks
you.
good on my end. I don't want to get like too caught up on this shadow on the left side of her nose. Oh, so Evie, to your question about stubbornness. Okay, so the way I think about this is, and I wish I could make this a little bit more instructive of a comment, but I tend to feel excited when I realize what's wrong and realize the only thing that's been standing in the way of fixing it is me. So I kind of just like make fun of myself a little bit when I realize there's something I need to do and I haven't done it yet. I don't know if that like directly answers your question though.
Yeah, I think that's perfect because the struggle is always real, and it always teaches us, not just about form and technique, but also about ourselves. I think that's a great answer. Really quick, guys. I think Chelsea might have already mentioned, but could Alex and Erica discuss what colors you're using for your underpaintings?
For my underpainting, I am using a mixture of, let's see, it might be ivory black, an English red, maybe cobalt blue, and yellow ochre. Oh, and maybe vermilion. It's some sort of combination of those things. What I was trying to do is get the shadow value. And I'm just gently putting in the shadow value. But I'm easing into it. So it looks light at the moment because I want to establish my drawing first. But long story short, I mixed the color. So I'm not using like raw umber or something like that. I mixed the color to connect to my shadow value. And then as you can see, I'm gently getting darker as I'm gently refining my drawing.
And I am just using raw umber. Specifically, some cheapo Winsor Newton raw umber at the moment.
Andrea says, thanks, I'll check out the video. Appreciate the explanation about the drying, importance and reasons for varnishing.
Oh, you ever just mix a color and wonder, like, am I losing my mind? Just kind of keep mixing and remixing.
Color, that's funny. You have a long way to go before that comes. No.
So at this stage of the block-in, what brushes of which size are y'all using?
I'm gonna let someone else answer that question.
What was that?
I'm curious to hear your response after this.
Yeah, I'm sure it was very good.
I mean, I'm using it says Rosemary. It's a sable brush, filbert, and it's size, what is it? Maybe 6? I don't know. It's like my pinky nail. And because I'm using a panel, and that's a pretty smooth surface, I am using the sable brush because it doesn't leave too many rough marks. But I did start with this is a Robert Simmons Signet filbert brush, and I used that that was super, super dry, and just used that to lightly block in, and now I'm going over with my sable brush.
And I mean, I just picked something. This is a silver Grand Prix.
You just came back from a Rosemary workshop, and
Yeah,
the
that's why
first
I don't
brush
even
you.
want to. I didn't want to say. I didn't even want to waste a good rosemary brush on this. Don't tell Simi.
I have some Rosemary Long filberts. I have like a couple floors. I started with a 6. It was a simple answer. Don't mean to suggest that would have been painful to answer that question. But it's more like when I was at Portrait Society, I feel like, we had so many great demos and people had the opportunity to ask these like really awesome artists so many cool questions. And if I had a nickel for everyone who was like, what's that brush you're using? Like, what's your palette? What's the brush? What's the palette? What's the brush? What's the palette? Over and over. I was like, there's better questions.
Yeah, for sure.
Though I must say, for the people who have less experience, sometimes you just need something.
That's true.
You
Yeah.
need somewhere to start. And so
Yeah.
so I sympathize with those questions sometimes. But it is true to say that the painting is like the quality of the painting isn't determined necessarily by the brushes you have or the paint that you use.
Yeah, I would have like cracked up if somebody had asked Mary Chin, like, what's the palette you're painting on? It's like, it's a paper plate from Kroger.
And just to double check with you guys, are all three of you using ACM panels today?
Indeed. Actually, I'm using a Raymar that's on MDF because I can't get this panel on ACM, unfortunately.
I'm using an ACM panel.
Yep, me too.
Okay, that was a mess. If y'all watched any TV recently that just made you like deeply want to paint, even though what you were watching had nothing whatsoever to do with painting?
Oh, let me think.
I'm interested to hear yours, Chelsea.
Yes.
I was just, I wasn't rewatching this, but I was like watching some extra content around it. It was Station 11. I was like a little resistant to watch it because it is a TV show about a pandemic. I hate what I'm doing on this painting right now. But it's like, fundamentally, it's a story about how essential art making is to just surviving as a species. Follows this troupe of Shakespearean actors who perform plays around Lake Michigan after the apocalypse has wiped out, I think, 99.9% of humanity. But it's just really beautiful and moving and reminds you of how important what we do is.
And what was it called?
Station 11.
Oh, Station 11. Okay.
Okay. Let's make that like.
There's definitely movies that I've like seen recently that inspire me just because the cinematography is so incredible. The Darkest Hour recently I watched, and about Churchill, and the cinematography is so good in there. It's like every scene is a painting. It'd be really beautiful to paint some of those scenes.
And I don't know if anybody has seen Everywhere, what is it? All at Once, Everywhere All at Once?
Everything Everywhere All at Once. Yeah.
That one kind of made me want to paint, very surreal.
Yeah, that's a pretty awesome movie, by the way, if anyone wants to watch a movie that deals with space and time and interesting concepts, human condition.
I'm adding that to my list. Okay. Kaylee, could I have you just do like, yeah-huh? Perfect. Is that good for everybody? Mm-hmm. Awesome, thank you. Okay.
Mariana says, hi from Santa Fe, New Mexico.
Santa Fe, New Mexico. Nice. Me too, Chelsea. Let's just stay in the back.
So I know that Chelsea is predominantly an alla prima painter, but for the rest of y'all, is alla prima style painting, do you find it easier or more difficult, or what are some of the differences there for you?
Personally, it's a challenge for sure. I find, I've said this before, but I find like my work always benefits from fresh eyes, multiple passes, not just for the drawing's sake and accuracy and all that jazz, but also to create more interesting shapes, more interesting paint application, and really spending time with something I find is benefits my work. At the same time, I enjoy challenging myself with alla prima painting because it's really great for decision making. It's great so you don't get into a mentality of, oh, you know, I'll fix this later, or like I'm in a slow pace, so it, you know, I can take my time. Sometimes you actually need that decisiveness, which alla prima painting is a great way of learning or experiencing that.
Yeah, you said that really well. I agree. I mean, yeah, having the time is amazing, but these things are like little exercises, and I would love to be more and more alla prima just for the fact that I can get it, you know, quicker and on the spot. Just, you know, but yeah, they're a lot of fun.
There's a lot of freshness of paint handling too that can happen if you're working quickly. That sometimes if you work over a long period of time, it's easy to kind of let that get erased as you work or as your painting develops. Those kind of fresh marks might get hidden over time as you refine it. So it's kind of nice to practice those energetic mark making and try to maintain it as you work on your piece long term.
All right, so Bruce says, I was watching an interview with Adrienne Stein yesterday, and she spoke of a period of her schooling that was very abstract when she was learning in Boston. She spoke about how out of her element it was for her and something she struggled with, but it felt important to go through. Later in the conversation, she shared how she approaches setting up a painting, and some of her abstract schoolings lent themselves to helping with composition and other elements. And Bruce asks, have any of you gone through schooling that at the time felt was very difficult and you thought was a waste of time, but later in your career, you appreciated and utilized what you had learned in some way?
I'm curious how you feel about this, Alex. I know that like my university education, I feel was like mostly hot garbage, but I did have teachers who were interested in painters that I never would have looked at. And like, it's just really cool to listen to why they care about them. And I feel like gave me a more open mind about those painters and an appreciation for them, even if, you know, it was never going to change the way I paint or anything like that. I'm curious, given our, like,
Well, I only went for a semester,
fair.
and there wasn't, I mean, I'm sure at some point there would have been something interesting, but also at that time I just feel like I didn't pay attention well or care enough. Just like you think back to high school and you're like, oh, I should
The
have.
show?
I watched. I don't have HBO, but
Okay.
I watched the first couple of.
There's some like interesting changes from the book from what I heard, just because they needed to adapt it. Okay.
I think my mic was off just a second ago. Sorry about that. Andrea, we will get that link to you soon. And I guess going back to Bruce's question, if y'all want to extrapolate on that a little bit, I'd be curious to hear what y'all have to say.
Could you recap that question for us? It's been
So Bruce asked, have any of you gone through schooling that at the time was very hard and you thought was a waste of time, but later in your career you appreciated and utilized what you had learned in some way?
Alex, you want to give your answer all over again?
Sure. I was saying off camera how I kind of feel the opposite because I didn't go through much schooling. I spent a semester in university and did like workshops, but no like long-term schooling. And there's just a lot of things that I would have benefited from that maybe at the time I thought was more useless, although not thinking of it that way, but just like at the beginning of, you know, educating myself, I just wanted to paint and I wanted to play with paint and I wanted to do all the cool brush strokes and all the flesh tones, and really just skipped out on drawing like practice. And I would have, you know, I really wish I made myself do it back then because I'd pay for it now. So that was what I was saying.
How are you going to know when you've had enough drawing practice?
When I can draw the thing.
We never have enough drawing practice.
Now I can put my finger on what always bothers me about your paintings.
Yep. Me too.
I wouldn't say I called it useless. I feel like that's too harsh of a word, but in my own university education, you know, we took. I of course wanted to learn a lot of, you know, drawing and painting, but those kinds of courses weren't offered, or like there were painting courses, but the technique wasn't the focus of the class, and so of course that was frustrating, and that's what motivated my going to Florence Academy, etc. But at the same time, you know, a lot of those classes did focus on developing ideas and thinking about what you're painting and how a viewer might view it, researching for an idea, and I think all of that, even though I was frustrated because I felt like I didn't have the technique to execute an idea, the practice of developing an idea and start to putting it into fruition was really useful.
Yeah, that what you just said, like researching an idea before, you know, you make a painting about it, it's like, that has just seemed more and more important to me lately, just as the years go by in my painting career, because it's just, you know, it seems too simple to just put something in front of you and then paint it and not, you know, put enough thought into what is the idea, what emotion am I trying to convey, you know. And yeah, now I feel like I'm trying to teach myself that as well.
What does your process look like when you're developing a new piece now?
Who are
Um,
you talking to?
Oh, Alex, but I want to hear from you too, Erica.
Yeah, well, it's different. There's not just one, but I either have an idea and so first let's start with, I was just listening to a podcast talking about how, some people think in pictures and some people think in like mostly words and some people think mostly in pictures, and I feel like in 8% words. It's just like my own voice in my head constantly. And so a lot of my ideas aren't like sketched out, I kind of write them out. And so yeah, I have a general idea and then I'll try and sketch something out, and then I kind of have to like think about what kind of model would best convey it, like what kind of clothes, what location, all that stuff. But I want to be able to compose out of my head and just kind of get a large sum of the composition down without a model or anything in front of me, which was really inspiring to go to Daniela Estone's studio in Italy, because the stuff that she's working on now, she was just explaining how, and she has an illustrative background, which I found out, but it's like so much of it is from like no model and just her in front of a piece of paper and not looking at anything, and that's so inspiring to me. And then even some of the figures, she was like, yeah, that one I got a model in, but this one's pretty much the same like as I first did it with absolutely no model, and that just blows my mind. And she was kind of like illustrating her dreams, and yeah, I'd love to have the tools to do that.
It's funny you say that. I'm actually taking a lesson with a concept artist tomorrow for that exact reason, to be able to start doing that kind of work.
Who is that? Is it online?
It's not like someone's online class, but it's going to be like, that class is going to be online. It's with Devin Corwin.
Oh, okay. I know him, yeah. Oh,
Yeah, I was
might
always
need to
impressed
sign
by
up.
what he was able to do as like exercises totally out of his head. And I was like, all right, teach me this witchcraft, let's go.
Yeah. So basically, my process looks nothing like that, and I want it to look like that.
Cool. Yeah, I would love to see what like your photo shoots look like someday or something.
Oh yeah. I can show you. It surprisingly looks like I've been interested in this idea of why the whole painting from a photo versus painting from life idea. Although there's like tons of reasons why you should paint from life, why the whole conversation is kind of stupid. When you actually look at paintings that you love, it's like so much of it, whether it was Lepage or Titian, it's like, it's not even, or let's say Botticelli, it's like, it's not that it's from a photo or from life, it's designed, and it's like designed intentionally. And if you use a photo to reference something, sure, if you use life to reference something, but if you're just copying from both mindlessly, it, isn't so special,
Yeah.
even if it's from life.
I took a workshop about a month ago, and the artist, Carolyn Anderson, she was talking about how it's kind of a stupid conversation too. And she was like, being able to paint from a photograph, it's just a different skill set. Like, you need to be able to understand how to compensate and paint as if it were from life. And like that's where people get caught up, is they think that like you just couldn't do it effectively, and so they don't develop a skill set that's specifically for working from photos, because some subjects you're not going to be able to do it from without photos helping you.
Yeah. And what's so interesting is I was reading a biography of the artist Dagnon Bouverie, and he was a naturalist painter, and it's like this book is just full of tons of his photo references next to the paintings, and they're pretty, like, I mean, what's awesome is you see all the ways he deviated from it, but it's also really cool to see the ways that it was like the photograph, because we just all, and I mean, I've seen Zorn reference photos, you know, all these people that we think just, but paint from life, because that's how I learned how to make something look alive and fresh and all of that, you know. And also, if I could afford to paint from life, I would, because you can get a better product and all that, but it's just not the most important thing in the world.
What about you, Erica?
In terms of my process of
Yeah.
conceptualizing idea,
Yep.
slow and steady. They don't come. It's not like I have a vision and I like suddenly just, you know, embark on a painting. I wish it were like that, but it takes time for me to just chew on an idea and have it clarify. Sometimes I'm just thinking about a concept and, you know, thinking about why I care about it, and, you know, maybe it's a story that resonates with me, and I try to think about, you know, what it is that I actually am interested in, and then slowly a vision will begin to develop. I envy those who think in pictures sometimes, being a visual painter.
Yeah, me too.
I think it's probably surprisingly rare, unless you are like an illustrator or a concept artist. I imagine it's a little bit more common for them. But I'm always surprised by the number of people who talk to me and say like, can you help me like learn to paint, my dreams, or like what I see in my imagination. I'm like, that's a different skill set. Like I can point you to some great concept artists or illustrators to help you with that.
Yeah, maybe I'll ask you who I should learn from.
I'll definitely let you know how it goes.
Yeah, because I think I got an email from him recently about some of his books and stuff that were on sale.
I think there was one like yesterday or something.
Yeah, I do have one of his digital books, and it was awesome.
The Creative Fundamentals.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, he has like a really cool section in there about the importance of thinking of value studies in terms of specifically to values, like just because it forces you to think about where the color information goes. It seems like such a simple thing, but yeah, it was like just very well articulated and illustrated in there.
Yeah, that's a good point, because I do remember when I was more alla prima, and you know, when I first started, I remember I always thought and even tried to make myself only think in shapes of color and getting the right color, and I like remember even thinking like, don't think about value. Everything is just a shape of color. If you get the color right, you know. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I think way more in value now, which that practice then probably helped me, you know, a lot now with value, and I feel like I switch on and off that brain while I paint, but yeah.
Really quickly, we have a question from Jasper Dargov, who asks, how many values are you splitting your painting into at the beginning stages?
2.
Well,
Final answer.
definitely 2 at the moment. But I don't have any color.
I'm slowly adding some color values. I'll say it starts with just light and shadow, so 2 values. Then I'll get it to maybe 3 as I do the background and I start to key my colors or key my shadows and darks. And then maybe 4, then maybe 5, and then, I'll slowly build that way. The goal essentially is to get to shadow, midtone, light, highlight. And then once I have that established, then I can maybe add some, transitional values in between. But that's what I think about in my mind as I am working towards covering this page.
Yeah, I think that is a really awesome way of thinking of it. I always want to just put, just put in the lights, just put in the shadows, and then, add some to it. But sometimes I'm like this little mosaic of, and I already have like 10 different values on there, and I wish I started it simple. So maybe I will this time.
I try to give myself a caveat by saying that's what's going on in my mind,
Right.
but not necessarily on the panel. But simplicity is always your friend. Thinking about the fewer values in your mind, or maybe a better way of saying it is the connectivity of your values. How close they are together, particularly if you're looking at the light. Seeing how there's a unified light shape, and even though there are value changes. How gradual you can be, and then conversely with your shadows, yes, there's reflected light, yes, there are accents, all that fun stuff, but it might be grouped into something. So in my mind, I try to organize a bit more simple, but then gently break things up as I progress.
Andrea asks if we have found any framers that we like locally in Raleigh.
That's a no from me, but I would love to know.
I don't know many, so I can't really give an answer for that.
I tend to frame things myself. Not like making frames, but yeah.
I've used Frame Masters several times. They're like slightly north of downtown, and they've been great. They tend to outsource to several handmade carpenters who do some really great work. If you're looking for somebody locally, that would be one of the people I would suggest to go to. You're not going to probably get the cheapest value, but you most certainly will get probably the best quality that I've found so far in Raleigh.
Well, I guess this leads into like a good sort of general question after. Is there a specific benefit that you guys have noticed from framing your own work versus outsourcing the framing labor?
I've never had someone frame my stuff for me. But I guess I do it in a very simple way. I don't make it really look pretty on the back or anything.
It's a good question. I don't know. Usually, what I've been doing framing wise is pretty simple. So I feel like there would be a different answer to this when I'm at like a different stage in my career, or I'm just framing things differently, or I have a different aesthetic or something. But I don't know. Like I typically order frames from places just because I know what I like and I know what typically suits my work. And by now I have like a rhythm of being able to put a piece in a frame pretty quickly and easily, so that it's not like eating up my time or anything. But yeah, I wish I had a better answer for that.
Bill Size says, I had hoped to paint along. She looks like a very compelling model, but I just returned to my studio. I'll download the image and create a quick sketch if I can fit it in. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah. Yeah, some of the sketches that like I see on Instagram that people do with the reference images are just insane.
Yeah, I like literally had someone's up as like inspiration for a little while. Kayla, could you like ever so slightly, just turn, a little bit, yeah. How's that feel for everybody?
Pretty good. Can you straighten your neck slightly? Yes. Is that okay?
Yeah, cool. I'm like working on like just refining these shadow shapes, and I was like, yeah, there we go.
Ara Shakatuni asks, Alex, do you have any recipes for halftones in indoor portraits? They are mostly green and gray or purple. Or are they?
Well, I do not have recipes. I'll answer that. It's generally based off what exactly what I'm seeing, or if I have a general kind of color harmony going, and let's say shadow's warm and the cheek is warm and it's looking a little too warm on warm, then I'm just trying to find like a cool neutral to start to vibrate some balance. But no, I mean, you said it's typically either a purplish or a greenish or a bluish or a neutral, but usually cooler color.
Okay, so I think that's the alarm bell for another break. If y'all have any more questions that you'd like to ask, please go ahead and type those in and we'll get right to them.
That was a good NPR voice. I liked it. Good heavy, yeah.
It's my wait, don't tell me voice.
Oh, I love it.
I think this looks good on my end. Alex and Erica Ho's looking good.
Yeah, I'm good.
Mm-hmm.
That was a very convincing gesture you just made.
So we were just talking about how right now I'm under like the most light, and from my viewpoint, all of these little marks just look like they're glowing. And then I remember the flowers I did for the last live stream had this nice glowy golden background and then looked like a chalky dark gray when we finally took it out of this room. So I don't know what to do with that information, but
That's why when you're landscape painting, it's useful not to paint in direct sunlight because your judgment of values gets all thrown off.
yeah, even I've one landscape painting and the just overcast sky was just so like bright compared to my studio that the same thing happened. It just looked dull and dark when I brought it inside. Have like an umbrella over it or something.
Andrea mentioned that they're having some issues with the link that we've posted. We're going to get right on that and make sure that you get a workable link soon. Thanks so much. Also, Ken McIntosh says, I started hosting portrait painting in my kitchen a year ago with a couple artists after watching your sessions, and today I hosted portrait and figure painting twice a week with up to 20 artists. Thanks so much for the inspiration and amazing content.
That's so cool.
Yeah, that is awesome.
I think, especially in light of the pandemic end times, it's really fun being able to come all together and create. So, yeah, good on you, Ken.
Wow. Yeah, this is not what this color is going to look like in reality. Oh, well.
I believe in you.
What are you going to do? If anybody buys this, blast it with light.
Penny asks, this goes against conventional advice, but I'm wondering if you have ever lowballed the price of a commission in order to get the job because otherwise you might not get it. Otherwise, the something better than nothing approach.
I did early in my career and then had a good enough reason to not do that again. I mean, it's not even one story. It's just like anything about pricing or just like working really hard to get a certain client or a certain job. Like I've always learned that those are the least fun projects to take on. And it's just added enough stress that it was easy enough to say, like, you know what, I don't want to paint under those conditions again. But I do think it's kind of a rite of passage. But I'm curious, Louie, like what your view on this is, but I have standard pricing. I do not negotiate prices with clients, and if they need certain things added to a piece, like it's multi-figure, like I have standard surcharges for that. So.
Yeah, so I definitely can speak into this, that I have most certainly fallen into that pitfall of negotiating prices in my earlier career in order to get a certain commission, especially when I was really needing commissions. However, I found that it prolonged a period of time where I felt like I knew what my value was worth as a painter, and so it took about a year or two to really figure out that my value was much higher than I was actually pricing my work for, just because of a haggled situation of a dear friend that relationship was involved as well. And then I heard some really great advice once that if you don't value whoever the person is to do the painting for them for free, then you should be charging them full price. And part of that was a way to really create a binary situation where you still felt like you could be generous, such as like donating to a painting to an auction for, say, St. Jude or Art for Heart or something like that. And if they were a very close friend of yours, if you cared about them enough to want to do something for them for free, it gave you an opportunity to even be more generous. And then price didn't play a role at all, versus just going straight for full price. The only times that I'll did discount in my past is I would, if I did multiple family members, I would give them a bit of a discount for doing multiple family members. But even that has gone by the wayside for where I am now, and that's just due to demand and my abilities to paint. The only other thing I would say to it is that Michael Shane Neal really had a great comment on Jeff Hines' podcast recently, where he talked about something that Ray Kinsler had said, and it was something to the effect, and I'm probably going to butcher it, but it was something to the effect that you want the price to be you don't want the price to be so low that you don't feel like you would enjoy painting whatever it is you would paint, but you don't want, and you want it to not be so low that you don't feel like you would be able to give it the ample amount of time to paint the way you would want it to be painted, which I find to be very important, because as I've gotten later in my career and you start trying to like time is money kind of situation where you're trying to churn things out, you all of a sudden find yourself cutting corners if you feel like I've got to get this out because I've got to start another painting in order to make ends meet, and I'm not able to finish it the way I would really desire to finish it at the quality that I wanted because I'm not able to make ends meet. So making sure you're pricing high enough to make that happen.
Erica or Alex, do you guys have anything to say to that effect?
I have less experience with commissions, so I don't think I have anything to add there.
Yeah, I don't have much experience with commissions either, but like working with galleries, I definitely I feel like the personality type to kind of underprice myself, and then the gallery, kind of helped charge what was actually, a good price. And then after a couple years of that, you start to understand where you're at and what your prices are. Yeah.
The only other thing I would say to this is that there's no harm in starting lower, because the way I looked at it at the beginning of my career is that at the beginning of your career, the amount of time you have available there's a ratio of like how much time you have available to work versus how much income you need, and on top of that, where you are in your ability and where you feel like you still have room to grow. And so the way I would look at it is that this is a commission that is helping me in my earlier career pay for my education. So anytime I did it for free or did it cheaper, I felt like, well, I'm getting paid to learn. And so that's a huge benefit when you're at the beginning of your career, because you can start your career at any stage, and there's a lot of people that are very interested in buying your early work just for the sheer purpose. They wanted to say they discovered you before you achieved whatever pinnacle of your career, whenever that might be. So that's just another way of thinking about it, that there are other unforeseen benefits of payment that are marketing, as well, where you're telling them that best tip you can give me is to share your experience with working with me, and that kind of thing goes a long way of starting a network in a location where people are shouting your name from your rooftops because they think you're, at a great value for high quality for where you are at that stage of your life. So price is not the only thing to consider. And so those are other things to consider as well.
Is there a minimum number that you feel like original art should go for at any stage? No, yes, actually.
50 cents.
That's what I sold my first artwork for. 50 cents. It was a little kid on the side of the road.
Are you serious? Because that's
Yeah,
awesome.
little drawings of sharks and camels.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's cool. What is your opinion on that?
So what I have been taught is that original work should never be less than $100. I'm sure some people would actually take that higher depending on what you're talking about. But basically anything lower than that and you're competing with things like prints, and it just doesn't make sense. Like if you made something that you think someone else would like that should be your starting point.
Now I understand kind of what you're saying, because I mean, if you did, the reason I didn't understand at the beginning is because, well, what is a work of art? If you did like some, saying a work of art in general would, you could put a paper clip on a table, So when we're talking about in this field of painting where it actually takes time to create something, the minimal that I tell people where you should always start is never go lower than minimum wage, ever. So that would actually go to something very similar to your standard of $100. It would never be less than $100 if you were working on something that took you time to do. I think all of those are sort of good standard thumbs to think about, when you're painting.
To add to that a little as well, I think it's also really important for young artists especially to bear in mind that while pricing their work, a lot of folks will underprice, and the fact is the time that you invest in your education and the money that you invest in your education is important to have reflected in that price as well, and that's something that can make your work more competitive. Where, even if you're not selling, 100 paintings a year and instead you're only selling, 20, if those 20 paintings are selling for a lot more, then, ultimately that's going to benefit your career better than selling 100 cheap paintings. Will asks, Erica, what was your experience like studying at an atelier? What was the best thing you were taught, and were there any things you'd change in the curriculum?
So I loved my experience. I went to Florence Academy in Florence, Italy, and just learned an incredible amount that I still feel like, I graduated in 2017, but I'm still thinking about things that I was, things are still resonating, and I'm learning what, how to really apply those things to my work, and it's just, I've had a wonderful experience. I don't know. I'm trying to think of if I were to change the curriculum. Well, I'll say that they've already done this. They have fewer bargs now, I did a lot of bargs, and they've reduced the amount of bargs. You still do them, but you start working from life. You do cast drawing quicker. So I think that was a beneficial. I think it's beneficial for students to get started working from life quickly. That way, you're applying the things that you've copied, and that you don't get stuck in copy mode, and you're starting to interpret from life. And the more practice you have with that, the better. But yeah, my experience has been really positive. Things that I take away, was that part of the question? Well, one thing that I've taken away from it? Or if you can repeat that part of the question.
The second part was, what were the best things you were taught?
Best things I was taught? Drawing.
Drawing.
Again, it's a lifelong journey, and I'm still working on it, still learning its nuances. But I have an approach to drawing. I have a method that then I can apply to approaching different subjects. So I learned an approach, and now I can develop how it's my own individual nuance of how I actually draw. But that's the thing from university that I wish I would have had, or at least some sort of method on how to draw. And so I was really happy that I got that from my experience at Florence Academy. There's a lot more, but I would say boiled down an approach to drawing.
So a question kind of piggybacking off of that for all three of you. What advice would you have to give to anybody considering going to an atelier?
I would say, I'll repeat what I've heard from a workshop. One of the instructors advised the students to empty your cup, metaphorically. So go in with a flexible mindset, and I think that way you can really absorb everything that's going to be told to you. It's going to be challenging because you're going to hear a lot, and you're going to be required to change and grow, and it's going to feel difficult at times. But if you go in with an open mind, I think that's the advice I would give.
Yeah, that's good. I feel like now, learning, or getting to this point without going, I could have imagined if I went when I knew absolutely nothing, and I would have just kind of adopted every single thing they said as 100% truth and no other way. And I don't know, I feel like going in knowing a bit of what you want to get out of it, instead of just becoming every single thing that they are, sounds smart to me from a different perspective. If I was to let's say go learn from somewhere now, just knowing how, if I would have went back then, I would have been a completely different painter. I don't know.
I think it would be really important to me to find out what the alumni of that program are up to, and look at more than just the people that they want to plaster all over everything. Because the place that I went, every single person except for 2 burnt out and never painted again. And that is,
Yeah, it's not a good track record.
yeah, not what you want to have happen.
Let's see. Ara Shakatuni says, I heard that the more soft edges, then more professional painting. Let's see. I suppose they mean, how does the start create differences in touch or the feeling of a painting?
You know, actually, I kind of like that idea of like the softer the edges. Not because it's like, oh, if I blur it, then it's, you know, professional. I wouldn't say that. But you can tell an experienced painter through the edges. I think that the subtlety in getting soft but specific edge quality is something that's like, takes a lot of skill. And so if you look, for example, at museum quality paintings, I think that's where you can really tell, like there's so much variety, but it's still so specific, but it looks like a painting, you know. That's really cool, I think, and really sophisticated.
I feel like that comes down largely to edge variety and control, though, not necessarily the softness.
Yes,
Although I think
yes.
really experienced painters will be more likely to lose edges. But yeah, I can think of a lot of real bad paintings that are very soft.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, on that note, we're going to take another break. And when we come back, I'll read some more comments and ask some more questions. And if anybody out there has any questions that they haven't asked, let's see. Ludwig from Antioch says, you all are just the best. Angel says, hi from Mexico. And Ara said, I heard that, oh no, we already did that. Soft edges, yes. Okay, let's see. Angel asks, when you're doing a portrait, are you thinking in changing something on the shapes, like redesign it or something? And if so, are your thoughts in that situation, thank you for being so cool?
When you're doing a portrait, or is that what it said?
Yeah, so I think it kind of means like as you're going from the underpainting and building a layer of color on top of it, how much do you have to consider the design that you've already laid out, and how often do you find yourself having to tweak that design?
I think our answers might be pretty different here, which could be kind of interesting.
I always try to improve the design. So I might start something, and then if I notice something getting better than what I've put down, then I'm flexible in terms of wanting to change that. I'm open to doing that. I'm not necessarily going to do it to such a dramatic effect where I'm like redoing the painting in the last 30 minutes, but I'll try to be flexible and improve the design as I'm working.
What's your controversial?
My hot take,
Yeah.
the hill I'm going to die on, and painting from life. I mean, the reason I thought it might be kind of interesting to hear the different answers from the three of us is just because I go straight in with so much of the drawing and do like a lot more kind of, I would call it guess and check on that drawing, whereas I know the two of you are going to be much more careful and methodical. So I am catching things with the drawing quite a bit and having to be pretty mindful of like, did I make a gestural mark that really lost some of the drawing there? And making sure I'm not getting too carried away to the point where I lose important information and have to go back and fix it.
I actually find that approach to be quite like similar in a way to what I'm thinking about. Where, you know, as I'm adding things, you know, later, improving the design, I still want to maintain a sense of the character of the individual and all that stuff. So I have to be cognizant of kind of those two things.
Interesting. I wouldn't have thought that, and I think that's a really cool similarity. What about you, Alex?
No, I agree with both. It's, I mean, spend a little bit, extra time on the drawing, try and get it right, but then, yeah, each stroke is hopefully correcting the drawing or getting more of the emotion of the character of the sitter and all that. Yeah.
Design is a concept that after graduation is probably what I think about most and how that applies to all the layers of the painting. That doesn't mean that I nail it every time, it just means I think about it a lot. So you know some basics on how do you approach drawing, but then what do you actually do with it, and how, where does your eye go? Like, what do these shapes mean, and the story you're telling, and they all work with each other. So
yeah, I agree. It's especially because I'm not doing portrait commissions, I do play around with the shapes, in my finished work a lot to just get, it's like, it's interesting because it's like, well, what is a good shape and what is a bad shape? But you can kind of, if you drew two shapes, you could kind of pick which one you thought looked cooler.
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
And so I feel like that's also what it comes down to, is if you put three people who are really good at painting what they're looking at, and if you saw each one individually, you would think, wow, that looks just like the thing. But it's all three are just going to look way different.
I think there's sort of some interesting politics involved in that, because I was about to say, typically, or to your point, Alex, how I would handle a commission is very different from how I might paint in here.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of funny because I am sitting here thinking about well, what makes a really good picture, whereas I am not brave enough to think that thought in a portrait commission. But at the same time, I found myself wanting to say oh, but there's nothing I want to change about her. I really like all the shapes. This is really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
It just made me think about how some portrait painters or figure painters are so good that they will just kind of create a whole new person on top of the model, but that's not necessarily a great thing. If you're constantly taking people's features in a certain direction, or slimming people down, or especially women, making them look younger, you could definitely kind of fly too close to the sun with those sorts of things.
Yeah, and sometimes it's just a lack of ability that you're hiding behind your special tricks.
Yeah. Making things you know are gonna sell.
Yeah.
Whenever I'm thinking about making a shape more interesting, it's not because the model looks boring. It's always because of the way that I'm applying the paint and simplifying the form. It needs to be more communicative and more lifelike and more varied, and so it's never the model, never the model's fault.
Yeah, and it's usually we do so much simplifying. I mean, obviously we don't put everything in, so it's kind of choosing your favorites, your favorite shapes. But I agree, because I'm not, changing the model to be a different person. But yeah, you choose out of the millions of shapes.
Mustafa says, good program with nice projects. Need to continually progress after some time. Good luck, friends. And then Penny says, I appreciate any advice for taking portrait references for commissions, in referring to camera type, lens type, lighting, digital manipulation of the image afterwards. Thanks.
That sounds like a Louis question to me.
It sounds like a book of answers.
Well, that's a lot in one question as far as all sorts of different things. As far as the camera and lens are concerned, there's only a few things that I think you should. It's like asking somebody about like what brushes you should use. If you know more about lighting and understand how a camera operates and how to control a camera, that's probably the best place to start. But some things that do help with portraiture is to keep your range no smaller than 35 millimeter and no larger than a 70. And that's why a lot of people use 50 millimeter for portraits, because the warping of your image will be minimal and it'll force you to get to the correct distance from your subject in order to take a good photo. Lighting, that is just its own myriad of things. However, I would say that there's like 3 or 4 very basic lighting situations that happen all the time. One of them is the Rembrandt triangle. One of them is called the butterfly. One of them is called half tone, and then there's a third tone. But there's 2. One's like over a third of the face being in light, and then there's a third of the face being in shadow. All of these things YouTube is really great at having a lot of information on those things, and so I would highly recommend, as far as photography is concerned, everything almost that I've learned, minus my photography courses that I took in college and high school, most everything else has been from YouTube. So there's fantastic photographer teachers and instructors on there for you to learn how to do good portraiture. I use a Sony Alpha 4, and it's a really great camera for the sheer reason that it does a fantastic job of autofocus and has a technology that tracks a person's eye. So it'll focus and give you a fantastic shot all the time of the model, and for that reason Canon has a comparable too, but for those 2 reasons almost all the cameras do great in color, and it's just more about learning the camera. But Canon and Sony seem to have the best for focus.
Actually, I didn't know that because you have all the Lumixes in here. I have a Sony a6600 for the same reason.
Yeah,
like squirmy
it's
children.
fantastic. In fact, the reason we use Lumixes for different reasons, they're great for video color, and video is a very different field as far as cameras is concerned than photography. So they are fantastic for video, but actually have one of the worst in the market for focus. So they're not very good for that at all. So there you go.
So as you guys start building up the skin tones, it's fun to watch how you're all starting to add kind of like the rosiness in her cheeks. And I'm curious to ask, when you're painting, are you ever hesitant to go too warm or too cool in your temperatures at any given stage?
I feel like it's like a corrective thing based on what your bad tendencies are. Because I would say, I feel like I used to have those thoughts a lot, but because, I've just painted so much and try to correct that, I've developed a nice point that's not too chromatic and it's not too neutral. But there was probably a point where I was all over the map, either going too cold or too warm. So, yeah.
If I get stuck or anxious, I just think put down the right value and you can figure it out later. That's honestly kind of what I was thinking about on this. Like, her skin tone reads quite a bit cooler than a lot of what I put down initially, and I struggled to figure out, like, am I at the right gray for a flesh tone? And then it was finally just like, yeah, get the value right, put it down, figure it out later.
I'm just thinking about the question. You know, I think the thing that's making me think about the questions, the idea of the fear aspect of it. Don't be afraid to put something down and have it not work. You can always scrape it off or paint over it. I think with color, it's easier to judge when you have something down and you know what to do with it in some cases. So, and also there's something very instinctual about color. So if you see some interesting variety happening, I would try to do it just knowing that it might take some time to weave it into your system. So, like I'm doing, trying to weave in my notes into a cohesive situation. So,
yeah, what you naturally kind of want to exaggerate, or it's that reminds me of this quote that we reference a lot that Michael said at one of his workshops, or at least that's the first time I heard it, was that you need to put something wrong down so that you can fix it.
Yeah.
And like, that's just how you have to start. It's like, well, it's blank, so I got to put something wrong down so I can fix it. And
That's a really great mantra.
Freaking true.
I like that.
Yeah, it's kind of easier knowing it's supposed to be wrong.
I was always, or when I was in school, I was told that, your painting has different stages of accuracy. So when you're at the block-in stage, it's not supposed to look like the finished painting, in terms of what notes you put down and quality of information. So I find that, useful to think, okay, when I'm at the stage of the painting, this is what I'm focusing on. Like, it's appropriate for this stage for things not to be working, because my level of accuracy at the beginning of the painting can only be so accurate when I'm just blocking in. So of course you want to, that's not giving a free pass to just paint without thinking. It's just reminding yourself that what is the purpose of this stage of the painting, and not to worry if it's not the final, it doesn't look like the final painting yet.
Yeah, I have to remind myself so much that when it's the painting block-in, like just doing the first layer, because I'll get caught up trying to make it look like a finished painting, and then I go back to all my most successful paintings, and their first, lay-in just looked terrible. And then I'm like, oh, well, that's how I kept the energy. It's because it was kind of messy, and so that's a good one.
So along that vein of sort of thinking about art and fear and how often the two tend to intertwine, to recall the weaving metaphor, what advice do y'all have for anybody out there who might be listening that's a little nervous to pick up a paintbrush?
Go for it and pick up a paintbrush. And to remember that it's just paint on a panel. It's like oily mud and pig hair on a stick. It's not, it's, don't, like art is important and art is meaningful and all this stuff. But at the end of the day, it's like you doing it. And so don't fear the result so much, value the action.
It doesn't say something about who you are or what your potential is. It's just where you were at that day. I feel like that's something that gets in the way for a lot of people.
And so much of painting is learning by doing. And, we can theorize about it a lot, we can think about it a lot, but at the end of the day, you have to do it in order to learn from it. So I would just encourage people to just do it, get started on your journey.
Yeah, and do it bad.
Yeah.
And be cool with it. Because you have to suck at something before you're good, unfortunately.
I feel like there's a lot of people who probably don't believe that you have sucked at this in recent history, Alex. Do you have anything to say to that?
Oh, I need to find some images.
So I have a couple of things with that. One of them was, I love what Jeffrey T. Larson said on one of our videos when he was like, you just need to go and put something down. And if it's wrong, well, nobody died, And so many times our fear is almost as if there's going to be some sort of death that's going to happen. The second thing is that I had a pottery teacher years ago who told me the parable of the 100 pots, where there was a teacher instructor that said, okay, you could either choose to do one perfect pot for the semester, or you can do 100 pots that aren't perfect at all. And inevitably, the people who chose to do the 100 pots were able to make a very close to perfect pot by the time they were done making all of them. And then the people that tried to make that one perfect pot always failed to try to do it because it was just so difficult to do it one time. So one of our mantras here is that you're gonna fail. It's baked into success, and so fail forward. Always consider the fact that the only way you're going to learn, you learn more from your failures than you do your successes. So if you want to be successful and you want to get really good, you have to go through failure. So don't be afraid of it. Actually embrace it, because the faster you fail, the faster you learn, and the faster you'll get better. All right.
And on that, let's go ahead and put them in, and we'll try to get them answered. Thanks so much. So as all of you are at this stage of building up color, what are some of the things that are kind of at the forefront of your mind that you're thinking about as you're moving from shadow to base tone to highlights? What's your hierarchy of thought there?
For me, as I'm working, I'm wanting to make sure that my big light effect is working as I add more information. So I like to step back, and that'll help guide to make sure that as I'm putting down color, that I'm not having to paint over it because it's not the right value. And so I try to keep that in mind.
Good question. I don't know how to put it into words. Just like as we're going from thing to thing, what do we think about? Yeah, well, definitely, like Erica said, like a cohesiveness. I'm also always comparing one thing to another. So it's like if you know, a good example is like if two shadows, like let's say the two shadows under each eye socket, it's like which one is slightly lighter than the other, and then if I was going to another shadow, is that one darker than that one, and just everything's hierarchy of value compared to what's around it. Because there's so many lighter spots and darker spots, and to make sure we don't have just a bunch of light and dark spots everywhere, it's how much lighter and how much darker. Yeah.
In a perfect world, I would have been going entirely from dark to light and like basically going one value at a time as I built up the color. I guess the replay will be the judge of whether I actually did that. But one thing I'm doing right now is during the break, realized like I kind of had a very even value highlight, like here, 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 here. And so I'm trying to break that up a little bit now and figure out what is the hierarchy of the lights in here and like where do I really want the viewer's attention going.
So I'm noticing that Erica and Chelsea, the two of you are starting to kind of like plug in the values of the background a little bit. Could you maybe describe how that assists in your process of, really nailing the values as you're adding more colors and getting a little bit more chroma?
The background is, for me, it's part of the painting, so it really helps me judge my value relationships. And so to have her coming forward from the background, it's something that's clear in the setup. And so if I don't have the background present, then sometimes it's hard to judge how bright I need to go, or maybe I'm not going bright enough, and when in fact it was actually needed to put in the background. And so the background's really useful for providing some context.
I wanted to give a really sassy answer, like I paint the background when I run out of ideas of what to do on her, which is a little bit true. I will definitely think of it the same way Erica just described. That's not so much the case with this one. Although it is a very like high contrast image, and there's a part of me that wants to kill some of the white of this. But I also do like the movement of my background structure. So yeah, that's just like a glimpse into kind of where I'm at with this right now. It's a little different for each painting I've done here, but yeah.
So kind of along the vein of, the importance of blocking in larger shapes in contrast to small details, do you treat the background as like kind of a casual playground where you can really play around with brush strokes and textures and different things like that? Or is it a more kind of like high stakes territory where you have to just be really, really careful and deliberate? Like,
Careful and deliberate.
high stakes and deliberate.
The highest stakes. I'm gonna let someone else give an answer to that.
Well, I do have an answer, because in demos, not really, but there's like a certain look that I like in some of my backgrounds where I like a certain amount of underpainting to show through. And it is kind of a high stakes thing, because once you lose that underpainting, you can't get it back. But at a sketch like this, I wouldn't care. Obviously, I have no background. So. But then sometimes there's been points where I've hated that I've put that constraint on myself, and then I just say, fuck it, I don't care. It's like, I'll paint an opaque background and make it work and prove to myself that I don't have to have the underpainting showing through. like it's a trick or something.
Okay, what do I want to do now?
I think it goes back to that sense of design, you know, and what your priorities are for the painting. And so for study, perhaps, you know, if you're trying to practice different ways of applying your paint, and you know, maybe you're not going to worry about the background as much, but I try to think of it as a supporting feature to the composition and to the focus. And so while I'll want energy in the background, I don't want it to feel flat or too, I had a teacher say, like painting a wall. You don't want to you don't want to paint a wall. And so you do want some energy, but at the same time you want it to support where you want the viewer to look. And so it can't be so dynamic where you're looking at the background and not at the whatever you want the viewer to look at. And in other cases, maybe the background is the focus, and then that influences how you paint the figure. So I think it's just an interesting conversation to have.
I feel like that, what you said, you don't want it to look like you're painting a wall, is so true, yet so hard to, you know, like articulate, because it's just like when you're painting a sky or like a wall, you want to feel like there's air behind the object and the wall, and it is just a weird thing to make it not just feel like paint, a painted wall. But I won't tell you how to do it.
Is that one of the secrets of painting?
Yeah. No, usually the answer to that is kind of like vibrating, hatching of complementary colors, or like warm and cools. If it's just all one color or all one temperature, it tends to just feel like a wall.
So we have some questions from some folks about lead white. So the first question is from Will, who asks, are there situations where you will choose a titanium white over a lead white? And to that I would add, perhaps why? Thank you.
So I noticed that the indirect painters, and I want you all to correct me if my kind of memory of this or perception of this is incorrect, but it seems like you all will typically come here with titanium or, you know, Permalba or something like that, and then reserve lead white for indirect painting. Is that fair?
I'm using lead.
Okay.
Just because I view these as always gaining painting experience. So when painting a portrait, I want to practice with the materials that I'm going to eventually be painting with. So that's just my thing. But also, lead is a little bit more transparent and more warm. So when you're painting flesh tones, it's really nice because you can get all of these really warm and luminous colors, or color values. Now, it's not saying you can't paint a portrait in titanium white. It's what lead white can evoke. I will use titanium if I want to make something cold and opaque. When I'm landscape painting, I will mix in a little titanium white with my lead white in order to create it, to get that cooler and a little bit more coverage if I'm doing something when I'm going outside. So.
Yeah, I am using a Permalba titanium type white, whereas in the studio I'll use lead. But I did like a 3-hour demo one night when I was teaching in England, and I used lead. So yeah, it depends, but definitely sometimes just use the cheaper stuff if I'm just playing around. And it helps me possibly not take myself too seriously.
Is that one of like the safety hazards of painting with lead? Like, might take your own painting too seriously.
Maybe.
You should put a warning label for that.
Hey, you might take yourself seriously.
So the next question that we've got, Alex Tabbitt asks, I've been considering using lead white, but I'm very concerned about its toxicity. Any recommendations you guys have for using it safely? Wouldn't lead still be present even after washing your hands?
That's kind of my concern with it, frankly.
I'd wear gloves. I'm not doing it right now, but I'd wear gloves. I think taking the safety precautions is important, and so I would, take your materials seriously for sure. If you're comfortable wearing gloves, I would do that, and be really cognizant about your studio space. No food inside, so that way you're not inadvertently combining food and lead white. But for sure, take precautions. Respect the material.
I don't personally work with lead white very often, but I would also add, it's important to work in a space that has really, really good ventilation. And that's just kind of a general rule of thumb anyways, but yeah. I guess one question that I'm curious to ask, although we're working alla prima right now, when y'all are working, perhaps in a little bit more layers, and Chelsea, I know you're usually alla prima, but as we're getting to more and more opaque light highlights, is there anything in particular that you'd like to say, or any recommendations that you have for people who want to know a little bit more about glazing?
Personally, I wouldn't say I do what is traditionally considered glazing, like maybe a wash of oil and a thin amount of paint. But that's just me. there's a time and a place, but I wouldn't say my kind of layered painting goes that extreme personally. So I don't know if somebody else has more to say on the subject.
No, yeah, I agree. I think it's just for like everyone listening, I think it's somewhat of a misconception how much people believe that we glaze. Just like the artists, the realist artists or whatever, there's like this misconception that there's so much glazing involved. And at least glazing how you described it. And I mean, there's the random occasion where that type of glazing is needed, and I'll do it if I need to, but not much at all.
Funnily enough, I do know some alla prima painters who actually will do that, like paint the whole thing alla prima and then just be like, color harmony was off, we're glazing the whole thing to unify it a little bit.
I have done that, glazed the whole thing with I've glazed the whole painting with ivory black a couple times for that reason. But
Did
not
it work?
usually.
I was going to say, how did you like the effect?
I mean, it did. I mean, it made the whole painting kind of cooler, but it wasn't a magic button. It wasn't, a magic color harmony button.
I find personally I don't enjoy necessarily the texture that happens when you do a wash of something and then having to paint on top of that. Like, it's not that I won't do it, it's just I find I will definitely paint on top of it, I will never just leave it.
Right, yeah.
How would you describe your indirect approach in that case? Like, what distinction would you make that separates what you do from glazing?
You want to go ahead?
I'm just not doing. I'm painting in somewhat of a direct approach. I am just getting to smaller and smaller shapes, and then once the layers dry, I am kind of stitching into what was already there. So there's a lot of color matching happening, maybe that, matching to what I previously had, so that it can cohesively all stitch together, but there's not like a glazing thing that's happening. It's still, pretty much opaque, except for the pigments I'll use, transparent pigments or something. But yeah.
Is that what you taught in the painting with layers class that you did a couple months ago?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Gotcha.
exactly. Someone actually asked me in the class, can you show an example of glazing anywhere? Like, can you just do it for me? And I was like, I can't, I don't think I can. There's nowhere I want to ruin my painting for you.
All right. Well, on that note, we're going to take another break. Send me your questions. And let's see. Going back to questions, Andrea A asks, Primalba white versus titanium, what are the differences? And do you ever use quick dry white?
First, I'll answer the quick dry white. I haven't, but TJ Cunningham uses a quick dry white, and he gets some really cool effects that I would like to get, so I'm thinking about trying that. But Primalba white reacts a lot like lead white in the sense that it doesn't take over your color as much, like it only tints it a little bit. You have to use a lot to change the value a lot, and so anytime I actually accidentally use titanium white, I'm like, whoa, such a little amount did too much. So that's why I use it, because it kind of acts like lead. It's just not as warm like lead white. But I'm aware that it has some ingredients that some people do not like. So I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, internet.
Yeah. Don't buy it.
Are there any colors in particular that you would say, like, oh, this is one color that I absolutely cannot live without on my palette?
I just made a wrong move over here. But first I would say white. Second, I would say transparent oxide red.
Yeah. My third would be ultramarine. Like, there's never gonna be a blue that I'm gonna prefer to ultramarine in a universal sense.
Oh, I just made her cross-eyed. Or have a wandering eye, I'm sorry.
Erica, what about you? Do you have any like quintessential colors for your palette?
I don't know. It's such an interesting question. I mean, it would probably be lead white if I'm doing a portrait. So I don't get anything looking chalky. But maybe a more interesting answer would be one pigment I've been really enjoying, I'll say that, is quinacridone magenta. I paint a lot of flowers and I just really like it.
Yeah.
So I found that it's been a really nice, nice pigment, even if I'm not doing something that's that magenta. It makes some really interesting pinks, and so I've been using that a lot.
I went back and forth for a long time on whether I was going to choose permanent rose versus permanent magenta to keep as my staple. I'm curious if you've kind of compared them at all.
I haven't painted with that, so I can't really judge. I don't know.
What
The rose, the one? I don't know that one.
When I did the color charts, rose was like a little bit more chromatic.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, okay, this might be a little bit more of a versatile choice. And so I wound up putting that on my palette and like really didn't. I've maybe put magenta on my palette once since then, but I second guessed that, like, I don't know, there's a part of me that's just like, oh God, I hope I'm right. Like, not, oh God, I hope my painting turned out. Just, I hope I didn't make a stupid choice with my palette.
I was painting orchids that were pink, and I found that that particular magenta helped me get that pink that I was looking for. And then I found out as I was painting other flowers, and like, oh, this actually helps get closer to that color that I'm looking for with other things too.
Just out of pure curiosity, have any of y'all ever painted with carmine?
I have not.
I don't know carmine. I have never. What color is that?
I only knew that from like cosmetics.
Yeah, it's a red lake pigment that's extracted from the cochineal insect. And historically, as a pigment, it's actually kind of cool. It's one that was used as a cheaper alternative to madder red after the Spanish came and discovered it on like cacti in South America. Yeah, I was just curious because today it's not a very commonly used pigment, but it is still commercially available. So I'm enough of a pigment nerd that I'm always curious to ask about that.
Have you tried it, Evie?
I have tried it and also made it myself, which if you ever do it, it gets really, really messy. Don't do it in the kitchen.
Yeah, I know that like my association with it is that it's actually become really difficult for makeup brands to formulate reds now because carmine was like the default, and there's like large enough social pressure for brands to go vegan that they haven't necessarily found a good replacement for it. I think there are actually decent ones now, but
Yeah, that makes sense.
I also wonder if it's kind of like one of those things that is really sustainable to source. And that's true for a lot of earth pigments too, but that's the only pigment that I'm aware of that is used at all, contemporarily, that is actually like from an animal. So Louis just showed me Danielle Protopapa's current sketch as they're following along, and A+++. It looks incredible. Thanks so much for sharing. Ara Shakatuni asks, do you think about using bold brush strokes in case you put some, I'm not sure what this word is. Bravura? Bravura to your Alla Prima painting for a design reason. Do you want me to ask that again? Yeah. Do you think about using bold brush strokes in case you put some bravura in your Alla Prima painting for a design reason?
Just in case it happens, like the art muses just reached down and took my brush and did it. I'm not quite sure I'm following the like just in case.
Meaning like to use, like to make brush strokes for like aesthetic reasons perhaps, or?
Is that sort of your
that's my interpretation of the question.
Yeah.
Like in hopes that happens?
Like, yeah, that's kind of my whole painting, if I'm understanding the question correctly. Of course, at this point, I'm doing a lot less of that and a lot more of trying to fine tune stuff while we have time, but.
I think it's kind of like, how you choose to like finesse a painting, and how, wild and bold you want to be in your brushstrokes or impressionistic with them. Yeah, it's interesting to see as you develop all of your paintings respectfully, how the brushstrokes characters almost in the story that you're constructing.
Yeah.
For the love of all that's good, just go down. Be the value you're supposed to be. Oh, that's pretty.
Totally, random question. Is there any music that y'all have been really into listening lately while you're painting?
Oh God, all my stuff. I don't know. Evie, I was listening to this earlier, and I actually thought I wanted to ask you if you ever listened to it when you were younger. Flyleaf?
Oh, yeah.
I was listening to Flyleaf today. You know what I'm talking
Have
about.
you ever been to the...
That's like
There's
a guilty
bookstore called
pleasure.
Flyleaf, too.
I'm so sick.
Yeah.
The last couple of days, Alex and I have discovered that we have a kind of funnily aligning music tastes.
Yep.
Some people really prefer not to listen to music while they work, but I'm somebody that it just helps my brain kind of process a little bit better.
Book person while painting. Music is for the car because I will start dancing. Yeah, if that's playing in my studio.
Dancing to the point that you can't paint.
I didn't say that, no.
Dangerously dancing. I'm sure Louis has caught me doing some like air drums. Just
All right, everybody. That is it. Thank you, everyone, so much for participating with us this evening. Thank you for all the people here who were a part of the production of these Stokes and for the 27th one. We needed to actually think about what we need to do for 30, because that would be like a fun milestone for Painting from Life 30. But anyway, everyone, please subscribe to our email list. That way you'll know when we do these in the future. There's a link in our YouTube, and we'll be doing another one next month. And we look forward to seeing you then. Y'all have a great night.